Discover the amazing secrets of Chinese mythology, 5 transformative tales exposed to inspire you. In a small Midwestern town, where the only change came in the corn-growing season, Sarah felt as though she was fading into the wallpaper of her high school history classroom. The usual clamor of disinterest surrounded her students texting under their desks, rolling their eyes as she passionately spoke of history's profound lessons. Each eye roll was a stone against her ambition, and every distracted glance pierced her resolve. She could practically feel her hopes flailing for air, desperately seeking an outlet in the dimly lit room. What she wouldn't give to ignite a spark in those young minds? She was drowning in apathy, caught in a tide that threatened to pull her under. But amid the tedium of grading essays and running late to meetings, Sarah discovered her grandmother's attic, a treasure trove of forgotten memories. As she rummaged through dusty boxes, her fingers grazed the spine of a book adorned with exquisite illustrations, a manual on Chinese mythology. The stories seemed to leap from the pages with vibrant life, revealing themes of perseverance, honor, and transformation that wove through time like a river. She was breathless. These tales breathed hope where history class had suffocated in her small town. Eager to shake the dust off her curriculum, she introduced the stories to her students, unsure of the reception. To her astonishment, laughter erupted. Discussions grew robust, arguments were spirited, and for the first time in years, she felt like a teacher again, alive with purpose. But just as she began to envision the seeds of interest taking root, a fateful ripple reached her ears, a chorus of discontent from parents who deemed her methods too unconventional. Suddenly, she was again at the mercy of scrutiny, their whispers like icy drafts that seeped through the cracks of her newfound confidence. Before long, concern transformed into a wave-collecting force. Her career was at stake, and her aspirations trembled. The fear of losing everything wrapped around her throat like a vice. She found herself hesitating to embrace her innovation. How was she to argue that the lessons from distant lands could resonate within the classrooms of her hometown? Doubts fluttered in her mind like moths drawn to a deadly flame. Who was she to elevate these stories of distant lands when their eyes were glued to their phones, uninterested in what was right in front of them? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let us continue. The school board, voices echoing against sterile walls, felt like a battleground where her ideals might crumble. Determined, she turned to Mr. Lee, her mentor, whose stories of survival and prejudice reinforced both her fears and her resolve. But as he recounted his struggles, her silence festered. A flood of anger bubbled within her. She didn't want to conform. The pressure mounted, seizing her chest. She couldn't surrender her purpose, and yet the weight of judgment bore heavily on her shoulders. In the chaos of this inner storm, a startling discovery pierced through Sarah's turmoil, a lineage entwined with one of the ancient tales from her new book. As pieces of her identity fell into place, she felt an awakening which ignited a fervor within her. A quiet determination began to thrum beneath the surface, a reclamation of her voice, a defense of her beliefs. The meeting approached, and the thought of standing before the board was daunting, but with her family's legacy at her back, she knew she had to rise. Yet, just as she prepared to advocate for her students and the stories she had illuminated, a figure emerged from the shadows, a long-lost relative, bearing a truth that threatened to upend everything Sarah had ever known about her family's honor. The atmosphere thickened with anticipation, and as she clutched the book tightly, she felt the stakes rise higher than ever before. Would this revelation bolster her fight, or would it tilt the balance against her in the most crushing way possible? All eyes fell upon them as anxiety coursed through Sarah, every heartbeat echoing, waiting for the reckoning to unfold. The figure stepped into the dim light of the hallway, casting a long shadow that seemed to stretch into Sarah's very soul. The familiarity etched across the stranger's features tugged powerfully at her memory, though she couldn't pinpoint when or where she had seen him last. A sudden warmth flowed through her, but it quickly chilled as apprehension settled over her like a fog. "I'm Jonathan," he said, his voice steady yet laced with an urgency that gave her pause. "We need to talk." Before she could process the request, he gestured for her to follow him down the hall, away from the prying eyes and ears of the gathering board members. Each step echoed in her ears as they walked, the walls breathing uncertainty into the space between them. What did he know? Why now? Her mind raced with questions that attempted to piece together this familial puzzle. Inside an empty classroom, Jonathan closed the door behind him. It felt like a sanctuary amidst a growing tempest, yet Sarah's heart thundered with confusion and fear. She sought words but only found the churning sound of silence raw and heavy. "Sarah, I know the stories you're sharing with your students," he began, his tone shifting to something more conspiratorial, urgent. "And I need you to understand the power those tales hold, especially within our family." "What do you mean?" she demanded, desperate to grasp the thread of this revelation but frightened of where it might lead. Jonathan's expression twisted between resolve and reluctance. "You might think you're just teaching about other cultures, but there's more at stake. Those stories we've woven into our family's legacy are about us. People don't just see them as tales, they're destinies. Long ago, our ancestors faced challenges that mirror what you're experiencing now, tied closely with honor and sacrifice." Her mind whirled. Could it be possible that her passion for these lessons was rooted in something deeper than an impulse to educate? Something about this made sense, but it also felt like a noose tightening around her neck. "If you're not careful, the board's discontent could jeopardize everything you've built. But you have to confront this." The words hung in the air, poisonous yet enticing. "Claim your voice, Sarah. The legacy is within you. Honor it." The thought ignited a spark flickering within her, an ember amid the darkness of disapproval surrounding her. What if she had more than just her job at stake? What if her family's honor depended on her making this daring choice? Her breath quickened as the enormity of his words surged through her. But was confronting the board worth the risk of their wrath? Could she truly challenge both tradition and judgment? If she revealed the personal relevance of the myths she taught, it might just sow the seeds of inspiration within her students, compelling them to learn beyond their immediate world. Before she could voice her decision, Jonathan placed the book she had found in her grandmother's attic onto her desk with a gentleness that belied the weight it carried. "Inside is the answer to your struggles. You must integrate your truth with these tales. They are not mere mythology, they are your path forward." With trembling fingers, she opened the book, heart racing as she pondered its potential, realizing for the first time that her fight was not merely against an apathetic board, but also a battle for her family's legacy. As she glanced at Jonathan, she could see a deep-rooted resolve glimmering in his eyes, the same spark she had ignited in her classroom weeks before. The revelations before her were a veritable crucible, melding her past with the present, her heritage with her aspirations. Would she brave the turbulent waters ahead to merge her destiny with the stories she had come to love? Suddenly, the bell rang, snapping her back to reality. The time for decision was slipping away, and she felt the weight of expectation loom. This wasn't just about her anymore, this was her moment to galvanize her truth. But would it be enough? The echoes of uncertainty coiled around her, bringing a new sense of urgency. With the board's meeting just moments away and the stakes higher than ever, Sarah clenched the book tightly, ready to ignite the fire of her conviction. As she stepped towards the door, she felt a palpable shift deep inside her. A commitment had been forged, and the echoes of an old legacy stirred. But would her newfound clarity prevail, or would it drown under the drown of doubt? The time had come to face not just the board, but also the weight of her lineage, the shadows of her family's past shadowing her every step. What awaited her beyond that door could alter her life forever. With a deep breath, Sarah finally opened the door, stepping into the corridor that felt suddenly claustrophobic. The gathering just outside the classroom loomed large, a collective entity bound by tradition and expectation. Her fingers still tingled from the energy of Jonathan's words, but she knew a storm awaited her. The board members had their heads bent together, whispering fervently as she approached. She could feel their gazes shift, unease painting their faces at the sight of her newfound determination. Each footfall against the floor felt like a drumbeat calling forth an ancient ritual. Would this moment honor her lineage or set a terrifying precedent? Would she become a voice of change or merely another whisper in a forgotten gallery? She paused at the threshold of the assembly room, the book still clutched against her chest like a shield. The fabric of her professional identity wove tighter around her, mingling with the stories she had shared, the mythologies now considered mere tales but perhaps carrying the weight of destiny. Was she ready to anchor herself in that legacy? Just then, a voice pierced the thick veil of apprehension. "Sarah. We were just discussing your curriculum," said Mr. Thompson, the chair of the board. His demeanor was sharp, every glint of his glasses further emphasizing his keen scrutiny. "Can we have a moment, please?" Sarah replied, surprising herself with the firmness of her tone. This was a departure from her usual approach, which belonged to the realm of deferral, but now she craved confrontation. The board members looked at one another in confusion, and an unsettling silence descended, thick like a fog. Sarah took that moment to center herself, recalling Jonathan's fervent plea to weave her internal truth with the external narrative. She stepped inside fully, taking the verbal stage, poised for what may be her most crucial performance yet. "I've been teaching these stories in a way that is factual," she began, the words flowing hesitantly at first but gaining traction with the vibrations of her heartbeat. "But there is more to them. It's about heritage, identity, and empowerment. It requires understanding not just the tales, but the challenges our ancestors faced." The murmurs escalated into a discordant symphony as both surprise and skepticism rippled through the gathering. She could see the flicker of uncertainty in their eyes, and that made her pulse quicken. "What challenges are you referring to, Sarah?" Mrs. Lewis, a longtime board member, asked, her voice weaving that familiar tug of skepticism. "All cultures evolve through struggle and purpose. The lessons from our lineage can shape perspectives, uplift spirits, and teach the importance of resilience. If I don't present them that way, I am withholding part of their power, part of our power," she asserted, the rising volume of her words flowing like a current that could not be contained. This was no longer merely about the curriculum, it was a confrontation with her professional values. Could she bear the consequences if the board dismissed her passion? The thought of standing beside truth versus the potential backlash was daunting. Yet, the very essence that intertwined her personal ambitions and her family's saga rooted deep into her formation pushed her onward. Perhaps what's being taught isn't just content. Perhaps it's identity, she added, recalling the tales of heroism and sacrifice whose threads woven so finely into her own story. "I am asking you to see beyond the surface. These narratives can transform us." She felt the sway of dissent, the pull of questioning gazes, the hanging tension in the air all around her. What if she was pushing too hard? But then, she remembered Jonathan's charge: honor her truth. Her heart raced as her resolve crystallized. Seconds turned to minutes, the air thickening with anticipation as she stood awaiting their response. She sensed palpable discontent swirling, but also curiosity. Would they reject her as she feared, or would they meet her halfway? The questions she had feared now brimmed full with a promise of possibility. Was this the moment she rebirthed her passion, not just for her career but for her very identity? Then, Mr. Thompson spoke, a crease marring his brow. "You may have a point, Sarah, but these are drastic changes to consider just before curriculum approval. Can you really handle this?" The question arched over her like a looming threat, and within it lay a crucial juncture. Could she convince them not just of her competence, but also of the significance of her vision? The moment stretched unbearably, leaving gaps of endless possibility. In that charged atmosphere, she felt the surge of determination within her and knew that this fight not only encompassed her journey but would shape the future of those entrusted to her guidance. She chose her next words carefully, ready to challenge everything she had been taught, ready to confront what awaited her. But would she find the courage to navigate the turbulent waters of doubt and emerge into the light? The weight of expectation pressed tightly against Sarah as she stood at the center of the room, the board's skeptical stares like arrows aimed at her resolve. She felt a pressure to respond, to counter Mr. Thompson's doubt not just with words but with an energy that commanded respect, a newfound force echoing Jonathan's own conviction. "Mr. Thompson, I understand the reluctance for change, especially at such a critical juncture," she professed, each syllable rising with clarity. "But what is education without evolution? What is the purpose of our teaching if we're afraid to explore our deepest identities and the narratives that define us?" In the silence that followed, she could almost see the steam rising from the members' collective brains as they processed her perspective. There was uncertainty for sure, perhaps even fear of the unknown. But beneath their skepticism, she sensed the flicker of something deeper, a yearning for authenticity that perhaps even they had hidden away, tangled in convention. "I can handle this," she continued, her breath steadying as she observed their expressions shift ever so slightly. "I have been navigating educational confines long enough to know that true learning happens when we dare to ask difficult questions and embrace uncomfortable truths. This isn't just about stories, it's about revealing our souls through our heritage." For the first time, she noticed Mrs. Lewis leaning in, her fingers moving unconsciously, tracing the edge of a document she had in her grasp. Was it possible that curiosity was blooming where once only skepticism had thrived? "Tell us then," Mrs. Lewis pressed, her eyebrow knitting rhythmically, "how do you plan to implement this vision without it becoming a distraction?" "Emotions can cloud judgment, Sarah." Her heart bolted at the challenge, but instead of retreating, her spirit surged forward. "I will provide a curriculum that marries personal narratives with historical context, empowering students to engage emotionally with their lessons. I want them to see these stories as living connections to their past, not just static content in a textbook. And as they learn to connect, they learn that their voices can resonate as powerfully as the tales of the ancestors they study." The board members exchanged glances, an orchestra of barely hidden apprehension and intrigue playing out in their body language. Sarah felt a thread of possibility weaving through the tension, coaxing her for more. She wasn't merely advocating for a change in curriculum, she was advocating for a transformation in how her students viewed their place in the world. "And if we fear change," Sarah continued, "we deny the opportunity for growth not just for our students, but for ourselves as educators. Those who understand their narrative could become advocates for the future. Why not prepare them for that?" "Interesting perspective, but let us consider the implications," Mr. Thompson interjected, his steely demeanor already having given way to a hint of interest. "What tellings do you envision? Where do you draw the parameters?" "By digging deeper into the stories that speak to resilience, bravery, and transformation," Sarah replied, feeling buoyed by the supportive shift around her. "I plan to analyze folklore that embodies these traits and how they relate to contemporary issues of identity, community, and courage within our society. We must challenge students to synthesize past narratives with present realities." The tension lessened. She could sense the air quaking with potential. Yet in the back of her mind sat the part of her that wrestled with self-doubt. What if this wasn't enough? What if they ultimately deemed her aspirations too radical? Secure in her mission, she pressed onward. The board members continued deliberating amongst themselves as Sarah observed the shift tightening around her goals, the way her words had begun to resonate. Perhaps she had ignited a spark, rekindled a fire that would force them to confront the very essence of education. As the discussion unfolded further, Sarah contemplated the next move in her strategy. She desperately sought to convince Mr. Thompson that she was capable not just of managing a curriculum change but of fundamentally reshaping how they viewed education itself. But would that be enough? Would they accept her vision or watch it die in bureaucracy? As she stood there, painfully aware of the dichotomy between her aspirations and the fear of rejection, she felt like a tightrope walker high above a chasm. The next decision would either lead to triumph or a desperate fall. The fabric of the board's consensus began to shift, whispers growing more fervent, excitement battling against apprehension. Sarah noticed Mr. Thompson's brow unknitting slightly as he remained silent, pondering her words. What thinking might lie within? Would they open the door to something extraordinary? Yet as the dialogue turned fluid, she felt a sudden chill slide down her spine. What lay hidden within the shadows of their skepticism? What truths were lurking, waiting to counter her vision when she least expected it? The moment was heavy with unformed questions, and she realized that while this conversation could impact her career, it also set the stage for a reckoning far greater than she had initially imagined. She needed to be ready not just for the board's decisions but for the unforeseen revelations that might lurk in their responses. As her mind raced with possibilities and strategies, the words she had yet to speak clung to her tongue, ready to unfurl. Would they be brave enough to embrace the unknown alongside her? Or would tradition harden their hearts against a future unforeseen? Before she could reflect further, Mr. Thompson stood, regaining control over the meeting. "Let us take a vote, but first, Sarah, we'll need a formal proposal on how you envision this evolution." Her heart thudded at the challenge that lay ahead. It was not only the board's decision that would change everything. The true challenge would be building her vision from the ground up. Was she prepared to dig deep into her own story to forge a path? The very thought ignited new fears and newfound determination to confront what had always seemed impossible. The next morning, Sarah awoke to a world that felt both familiar and foreign. The sunlight streaming through her window did little to lighten the heavy weight of her task ahead. The board meeting from yesterday lingered in her thoughts, the conversations replaying like a deeply etched video loop. They were not just approving a curriculum, they were potentially allowing her to shift the foundation of education itself. But visions and proposals didn't materialize out of thin air. She needed a plan. She immediately set to work, gathering her notes, diving into academic texts, and exploring folklore that she had only sketched over the years. As she read, ideas flowed through her like a rushing river. The tales of vibrant heroes and heroines, their struggles against adversity and their revelation of self, illuminated the pages and sparked something new within her. Yet she could not ignore the shadow of self-doubt creeping in. Did these stories hold enough weight? Were the narratives universal enough to connect with her students? Each time she wrestled with these questions, the growing conviction in her heart nudged her. Perhaps these tales could indeed bridge the disconnect she felt in conventional education stories that showed resilience not as a distant concept but as a lived experience connected to their own lives. In the warmth of the midday sun, Sarah wrote her proposal, her pen gliding across the paper, adrenaline fueling her creativity. She structured the document meticulously, outlining how she would integrate storytelling into lesson plans, encouraging students to dissect cultural tales relevant to their experiences. The lessons were to focus on emotional engagement, instilling a sense of belonging within the discourse of history, identity, and community. With each sentence, she felt her vision crystallize, her confidence edging a notch higher. But as the hours turned to evening, a gnawing anxiety took hold. What insights would the board offer? Or worse, what if they presented challenges she hadn't anticipated? She imagined sitting back at that conference table beneath their watchful gazes, her heart racing as the initial excitement transformed into cold fear. They could reject her proposal. They could dismiss her completely. Staring at the wall, she realized that she had to prepare not just for their critiques but for herself, the self that had doubted her capability for far too long. Each moment of trepidation nudged her to confront the past shadows of her insecurities. It was time to unveil her story, not just the professional she wore like armor, but the vulnerable, aspiring educator who had feared failure since her early years. That night, as she lay in bed, she found herself reflecting on her journey, the times she had doubted her worth as an educator and the moments that had rekindled her belief in impactful teaching. An old memory surfaced, of a mentor who had once urged her to embrace her bravery. "Dare to tell your own story, Sarah. That is where the magic lies." And in that moment of reflection, she resolved to dig deeper. She would weave her own experiences into the fabric of her proposal, acknowledging the struggles she faced along the way and embracing the uniqueness of her narrative. It wouldn't just be an abstract academic document, it would be an invitation for others to join her, to connect through the shared power of storytelling. The next day, armed with her freshly penned proposal, she felt a rush of empowerment coursing through her. This journey was as personal as it was professional. It was not merely about curriculum but about creating space for authenticity, both her own and that of her students. As she stepped into the conference room, clutching her proposal with a mix of pride and anxiety, she realized this was the moment. The moment to not only advocate for her students but also to embrace herself as both a teacher and a learner. But just as she crossed the threshold, she hesitated. Would they see her raw honesty as a strength or a vulnerability? The atmosphere buzzed with anticipation, each board member's stare probing her resolve. The time had come to face the board, but hidden behind the anticipation lay the thought, what if the greatest challenge was not their skepticism but the fear of unveiling her true self? What would it mean for her journey to unfold in front of their eyes, stripped of pretense? She took a deep breath, adjusting her grip on the proposal. This was her chance not just to change others but to transform herself in the process. As she stepped fully into the room, she could feel the weight of her decision. Would they embrace her vision, or was a more formidable opponent lurking in the shadows, ready to challenge her newfound commitment? The meeting began as the air around her thickened with possibilities, each moment stretching forward, taut with apprehension and anticipation. Sarah could feel destiny teetering on the cusp of a decision that would shape not just her career but her entire identity as an educator. Would her truth resonate? Would her voice pierce through the skepticism that loomed heavy in the room? The answers awaited, just beyond the threshold of her confidence. The board members settled into their chairs, their expressions inscrutable. As Sarah stood at the front of the room, the reality of the moment crashed onto her like a wave. Each breath felt charged, laden with the potential weight of her proposal. She placed her hands on the table, holding the pages steady, and began to speak. Thank you all for being here today. I'm excited to share with you a vision I believe could transform our students' learning experiences. Her voice trembled slightly, but she steadied herself, recalling the stories she had passionately unearthed just days prior. She introduced her proposal, articulating the need for integrating storytelling into the curriculum. Her narrative drew from her own experiences growing up, how tales had shaped her understanding of the world, and how she hoped to do the same for her students. She referenced heroes from both classic literature and cultural folklore, illustrating their struggles not as distant, arbitrary events but as reflections of resilience that her students could relate to. As she spoke, she observed the board's reactions, searching for signs of resonance. Some leaned forward, others furrowed their brows. But amid the flickers of engagement, there were also signs of skepticism. Each furrow sharpened into a question mark over her confidence, a prick of self-doubt rearing its head like a dark specter. By the time she reached the core of her proposal, her hands began to shake. Yet, in that moment of vulnerability, a realization struck her: the very essence of storytelling was about connection. She was sharing her truth, and that authenticity had a power of its own. What if it wasn't the proposal alone they were judging, but her passion, her commitment to genuine education itself? Education shouldn't be suffocated by rigid frameworks. Instead, it should breathe life into our students' experiences, Sarah continued, passion igniting in her voice. When students see their own stories reflected in the lessons, they're more likely to engage, to struggle, and to thrive. The board's chair, a stern man with a reputation for unyielding critiques, raised his hand. Sarah's heart dropped. Here it comes, she thought. I see your intention, Sarah, he said, but how do you plan to address the varied backgrounds of our students? Will these stories not alienate those who can't find their own reflection in them? The question stung, but it was also a moment of clarity. This was not just a challenge but a dialogue. Thank you for that important question, she replied, her voice steadier now. I believe these stories have the capacity to speak universally. However, I'm also committed to developing a curriculum that invites students to find and share their own narratives. By allowing them to bring their voices into the classroom, we create not just a learning environment, but a community where every story matters. There it was, her foundation building bridges instead of walls. The notion that teaching could invite personal contributions resonated powerfully within her. She had fragmented her insecurities and reconstructed them into a whole that could stand firm against opposition. As she concluded, she felt the air shift, the board members exchanged glances, weighing their options. Sarah could sense her own heart thudding in her chest, the tension pulling taut, but also filling her with an unexpected confidence. Just as she was beginning to entertain hope, another board member spoke. You mentioned the importance of storytelling, but how will you measure its effectiveness? The question bubbled up something deeper within Sarah. This was more than about academic success, this was about transformative growth. Preparing to answer, she dug deeper. I believe we can measure engagement, reflection, and growth not just through tests, but through student narratives, through their reflections on what they've learned and how it's shaped their perspectives. Storytelling aligns with emotional intelligence, and fostering that can illuminate the path for students to understand themselves in relation to their education. The tension buzzed hotter. Were her appeals compelling enough? Could she convince them that the value of these narratives wasn't easily quantifiable yet immense? Your proposal is ambitious, Sarah, the board chair ventured, adjusting his glasses and leaning back thoughtfully. But ambition alone doesn't win approval. It requires a detailed plan, including a clear framework for implementation and assessment revenue. The implications of his words solidified her reality. She wasn't just defending an idea, she was navigating a system that didn't always welcome innovation. This endeavor wouldn't simply challenge her professionally. It was an inner battle against fear and self-doubt resurfacing when she most needed clarity. As the discussion continued around her, Sarah felt the weight of her dual role pressing down. The proposal had opened possibilities, but it had also uncovered her inner conflicts. Would her vision materialize into actionable steps? Could she lead this change without losing herself in the process? Sarah realized that the essence of teaching was indeed about personal transformation. And she needed to embrace that growth within her. Instead of aiming solely to convince them, she needed to convince herself. As thoughts raced through her mind, a new anxiety gnawed, compounded by an unexpected realization: the moment to disrupt her own narrative was now. Things were shifting on a scale she hadn't anticipated, leading toward uncertain terrain. Sarah, the chair's voice broke through her frenetic thoughts once more. You shared a compelling vision, but what comes next? As the board leaned in, captivated by her journey, Sarah felt the air thick with anticipation. Would she be ready to step forward into the unknowns they were about to unveil? Her heart raced with both excitement and dread. This was only the beginning, and there were more challenges ahead that awaited her. What lay beyond their inquiries? Would her educational revolution spark more rebellion against established norms, or would it act as a beacon guiding others to fight alongside her? Sarah struggled to break her gaze from the board members, wishing she could pierce their stoic expressions and reveal what they truly thought. The weight of the question lingered in the room, almost palpable, stretching the air tight with expectation. What came next was not just an answer but the map for her journey ahead, the roadmap she desperately needed to chart within this complex labyrinth of educational reform. She took a deep breath, gathering her resolve. Next, she began cautiously. It will be crucial to pilot this program in a carefully selected environment. To assess how storytelling engages students, we'll start by integrating it within existing subjects, allowing us to collect data while still respecting the integrity of the original curriculum. The board members nodded, some making notes, but skepticism flickered within their eyes. Sarah felt the subtle shift. She was battling more than proposals, she was grappling with ingrained ideologies. They weren't just weighing her suggestions, they were assessing whether they could diverge from the path established by their predecessors or remain comfortable within their echo chambers. Yet, deep within her, an ember glowed brighter, a burgeoning sense of clarity fueled by the idea that this challenge was not merely external. It was a reflection of her own internal battles, her fears as a teacher, and the education system she wanted to reshape. Would she allow these doubts to dictate her future, or would she craft a new narrative for herself, one that mirrored her vision? Moreover, Sarah continued, each narrative framework can be assessed qualitatively through student engagement metrics. We can host workshops where students write their stories, analyze them, and even present them in peer groups. Their voices will drive the success of this initiative, ensuring it resonates with varied backgrounds. Encouraged by her own words, she started to visualize the classrooms buzzing with energy, students' eyes lighting up as they crafted their own tales. Nothing would be more powerful than witnessing that transformation students not just absorbing knowledge but actively participating in their education. Engaging students in this way will create ownership over their narratives, she added, steadying her hands on the table. They'll be more likely to invest in the subject matter when they see themselves within the stories. Empathy will grow as they hear each other's perspectives, leading to deeper understanding and respect. Those are idealist notions, Sarah, a different board member interjected sharply. But how do you anticipate handling students who might resist this new approach? What if some students are unwilling to share their stories or feel threatened by their peers' experiences? The question was a direct challenge to the very foundation of her proposal. As uncertainty washed over her, she wrestled with a mounting fear. Could she provide them with a sufficient strategy to handle potential resistance? I believe that resistance is part of the learning process, she replied, striving for composure. We would need to create a safe environment where sharing becomes an act of vulnerability rather than competition. Establishing rapport with students and fostering trust will be key. The board chair raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet unconvinced. Trust must be earned, after all, he mused, watching her carefully. It was another nudge into the depths of her psyche. Trust wasn't only about what her students would feel, it was about what they would see in her. Sarah felt the gravity of that revelation. The battle to cultivate trust extended beyond her students. She had to earn it from the board too. She needed to demonstrate not just the feasibility of her program but also her ability to lead it through tumultuous waters. As the discussion continued, she began to connect the dots, her vision unraveling a web of complexity. She recognized that every question posed held the potential to shape her plan further. This was not a testament to her insecurity but a chance to redefine her road to see pitfalls as stepping stones rather than barriers. In every critique, there lay an opportunity for growth. Yet, despite the clarity that arose from the discussion, a lingering cold tremor of doubt gripped her. Would her determination be enough to push through the apprehensions? Could she meet the expectations of both students and board members alike without sacrificing her essence? Sarah understood, she was standing at the edge of a precipice, a turning point. The future of her proposal hung precariously, and with each question, she edged closer to either soaring toward success or plummeting into the depths of rejection. As she concluded her arguments, she observed their faces curious, skeptical, but undeniably engaged. The moment hung in the balance. So, how do we ensure that this idea can be more than just a concept on paper? One board member asked, prompting a crucial pivot in their inquiry. Sarah steadied herself, knowing that the discussion had transformed. The foundation was laid, but now the next steps loomed like shadows ahead. She sensed the weight of their expectations shifting from theory to actionable decisions, and somewhere within, a new fire ignited. But would it be enough? Could she wield the force of her vision not only to advocate but to inspire belief? She braced herself, ready to face whatever the board would throw her way next. The moment of truth approached, and she could feel the tension electrifying the air. What lay ahead was uncertain, yet the winds of change beckoned, daring her into the unknown. The board chairman leaned back thoughtfully, fingers steepled, his gaze piercing as he scrutinized Sarah. The air thickened, charged with anticipation. She felt a swell of anxiety rise and fought against the instinct to retreat. This is when the real work begins, she reminded herself. Let us discuss logistics. Realistically, how will this program be funded, and who will oversee its implementation? He pressed, prompting a slight shift in the demeanor of the room. Instead of resisting, Sarah leaned into the tension, embracing it as a catalyst for her resolve. Excellent points, she acknowledged, letting the classroom of ideas in her mind expand. The pilot can be phased in through existing budgetary allocations, pilfering from less impactful programs for the first year. We'll track its success carefully, providing measurable results that will warrant future funding. She could almost see the needles of doubt in their eyes begin to soften, weighed down by a pragmatic approach. But her internal voice prodded at her: were these mere tactics to gain approval, or was she committing to a vision that placed students at the heart of learning? This requires a champion, an older board member remarked, his tone suggestive. Can we be assured that you will lead this initiative to its fruition? The hearts of the board members had shifted, but Sarah knew she had entered uncharted territory, a challenger in her own right. Not only was she advocating for change, she was also being thrust into the limelight as a potential steward of that change. The realization brought with it a gust of exhilaration and fear. Absolutely, she replied, steadier than she felt. But this isn't solely about me. This will depend on the buy-in from the staff and our students. I envision forming a committee where teachers collaborate to ensure this program is inclusive and sustainable. With each change in tone from the board, Sarah's confidence began to reshape the core of her nervousness. She recognized the layers of vulnerability attached to leadership, the responsibility to mold an idea into reality while absorbing the inevitable critiques. The board continued their examination. A labyrinth of possibilities unfolded before her. Each member posed a question that beckoned a new solution. Did Sarah truly believe she could navigate these waters? Did she perceive each query as a threat or a chance for deeper engagement? As she highlighted her ideas about creating a collaborative committee, a surprising clarity settled over her. In proposing shared authority, she was simultaneously relieving herself of the overbearing pressure to be the single architect of this project. It symbolized a profound connectedness she had not foreseen. Managing expectations is critical, she elaborated. We can create opportunities for feedback, allowing teachers to contribute their insights. A younger board member, who had observed with a keen yet guarded expression, finally spoke up. And if the pilot doesn't perform as you expect? Do you have contingency plans? The question was a jolt, a reminder of the stakes she faced, not just a professional plunge, but an emotional one as well. A fissure opened in her resolve, revealing the truth that lay behind her initiative. What if her vision crumbled? What if she fell short? I believe in adaptation, she responded slowly, allowing the weight of her thoughts to land powerfully on the gathered board. If the pilot isn't successful, we will analyze the feedback, reassess our strategies, and pivot to improve. It's essential to approach this process dynamically. The response transformed the room. The board's expressions shifted from skeptics to intrigued participants. Yet, even as she felt the currents of support, doubt flickered like an errant spark. Could she really stand through the ordeal of a potential failure? The vulnerability of leadership loomed large, as did the prospect of earning the very trust she sought. Just as the conversation began to settle into the realm of constructive dialogue, Sarah felt the energy in the room shift once again. The board chair leaned forward, sensing her retreat into uncertainty. Sarah, we want to see you succeed. But succeeding means we need absolute clarity in every aspect of this plan. With that, he slid a stack of documents toward her, and Sarah knew the next phase had begun. Indications of the board's unwavering scrutiny now lay stretched out in front of her like an intricate map, inviting her to explore each avenue meticulously. As she rummaged through the forms, her mind raced. Every detail reflected her identity as an educator and a leader. Would she embrace this challenge fully, or allow her fears to turn into barriers? In this moment of self-reflection, deep beneath her wavering surface, the unshakable whisper of determination began to rise again. Sarah had a choice to make: sink back into self-doubt or boldly step onto the path of transformation that awaited her. As she closed her eyes briefly, searching within for strength, Sarah felt ready to confront whatever the board might unveil next. Could she inspire belief in her vision and maintain an unwavering grip on her mission? And when the time came, would the board's faith echo her own, illuminating the shadows looming overhead? As Sarah opened her eyes, she took a deep breath, trying to center herself in a moment that felt simultaneously electric and daunting. The documents before her felt weighty, not merely as papers to review but as tangible manifestations of the journey she was about to embark upon. There was no turning back now, no retreating into the shadows. The challenge of leading this initiative loomed fiercely, whispering tales of both potential pitfalls and rich rewards. She flipped through the preliminary reports, piecing together every insight and suggestion noted by her colleagues. Each page flickered past like snapshots of her past experiences intertwined with aspirations, dreams woven into the fabric of her ambition. The painstaking detail of the reports underscored one glaring truth: this was not merely a professional undertaking, it was a personal declaration. She was staking her identity on the success of this initiative, and with it came a barrage of questions. Was she ready to lead? Was she capable of fostering an environment that could transform the educational landscape? The board members studied her intently, each one a silent judge of both her plan and her readiness. Their scrutiny ignited a fire in her, galvanizing her pulse into a rapid beat. Instead of crumbling under the weight of their gaze, Sarah harnessed it, channeling the anxiety into a focused resolve to articulate her vision clearly and compellingly. "I appreciate the concerns," she began, her voice steadying as she made eye contact with each board member. "I understand the desire for clarity, especially in planning our pilot program. I'm prepared not just with a vision but also with a detailed roadmap." With this statement, she sensed the shift in the atmosphere, their curiosity mixed with concern morphed into cautious optimism. Holding the weight of expectation as her armor, she leaned forward, projecting both enthusiasm and conviction. "We need to consider potential challenges as opportunities for growth. I want to instill a culture of continuous feedback not only from educators who will implement the program, but from our students as well. Their voices will shape how we adapt our approach." As she spoke, Sarah felt the elusive cocktail of fear and excitement blend into something empowering. Each word she crafted was a selection from her internal arsenal, strategic yet empathetic, practical yet visionary. The board members nodded, encouraging her to delve deeper. Every nod felt like an affirmation, reducing the emotional distance between doubt and belief. "What if we hold regular evaluation meetings?" she proposed, her tone steady. "These can be forums for teachers to share successes and hurdles alike, fostering a community of support rather than isolation." The image of a collective working toward a common goal rang through her mind, echoing the values she had long held dear as an educator. However, her inner voice wrestled with the reality of potential missteps. With such high expectations, what if she faltered? What if the very sessions meant for gathering insights echoed her shortcomings instead? Sweeping that doubt aside, she moved forward with conviction. "Strategic adaptations can only enhance our program. I'm prepared to face critiques head-on and use them as tools for analytical reflections." Amid the conversation, Sarah's focus narrowed on one board member whose expression remained skeptical. An air of challenge emanated from him, and she realized that he held the potential to bolster her initiative or drain it of its life. "You seem concerned, Mr. Hawthorne," she remarked, her voice steady yet inviting. "I've seen initiatives falter before," he replied cautiously. "Where's the safeguard for accountability in your plan?" His question was not merely a challenge, it was an opportunity to redefine her approach. "By establishing clear metrics for success," she asserted, "and creating a feedback loop that includes all stakeholders, we mitigate risks and hold ourselves accountable. It demonstrates our commitment to transparency." This was not just about defending her idea. It was about inviting partnership. As she spoke, an invigorating clarity unfurled within her. She now understood that the necessary battle was not against the doubts of others, but rather against her own internal conflicts. Could she truly navigate this complexity, emerge as a leader, and endorse profound changes that could inspire an entire educational community? Sarah's resolve solidified with each interaction, building a network of faith not only among the members of the board but within herself. With a final glance at the documents sprawled out before her, she knew this was just the beginning of what the future could unravel. But she would need more than strategy and support, she would have to confront her understanding of failure. Unable to shake the weight of trepidation, she pondered what failure might look like. Was it the collapse of her initiative, or could it be something far deeper, an abandonment of her core beliefs for the sake of predictability? Just as she prepared to connect the final points of her presentation, one thing weighed heavily on her heart: did she have the strength to navigate the labyrinthine trials ahead, or would she crumble under pressure? The session's conclusion loomed ever closer, and with it, the moment of truth awaited just around the corner. As Sarah approached the final moments of the board meeting, her chest tightened with a mix of excitement and unease. She had shared her vision, illustrated her strategy, and attempted to dismantle the doubts of the board members. Yet, as the room's energy shifted once more, she felt the weight of expectation draping heavily upon her shoulders. With the conversation coming to a close, Mr. Thompson turned toward her and said, "Sarah, this proposal has merit. However, we will only approve it if you can address one final point. How will you measure its success in tangible terms by the end of the year?" A hush fell over the room, each board member hanging on to her response. Sarah felt the urgency of the moment, and her heart raced as her mind whirled to compile the threads of her carefully crafted plan. "Success will be defined through a blend of quantitative and qualitative assessments," she responded firmly, her voice steadying with conviction. "We will track student engagement through attendance and participation alongside surveys that ask students about their connection to the content. Furthermore, I will facilitate discussions and collect their reflections to quantify how they perceive their learning experiences." The board absorbed her response, and for the first time, she sensed them leaning into the conversation, intrigued rather than skeptical. Additionally, she continued, embracing the momentum, "I propose we connect this initiative with community projects, allowing students to apply their learning outside the classroom. Their achievements in these projects can act as a benchmark for measuring the impact of this storytelling curriculum on their lives." A faint murmur of approval rippled across the board. For Sarah, this was the moment she had longed for, the culmination of her journey not just as an educator but as a torchbearer of potential change. The board chair turned to her once more, the expression on his face softening as he regarded her with newfound respect. "You've articulated a plan filled with passion and purpose, Sarah. My colleagues and I are interested. Let us take the necessary steps for implementation. We hope to see this pilot rolled out next semester." Joy surged through Sarah, igniting her from within like a burst of sunlight breaking through clouds. She realized she had not just defended her vision, she had transformed the narrative of her professional identity. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "This is not just an approval. It means the world to me and my students." Standing before the board, she felt an electric pulse course through her veins. Her journey had come full circle, a metamorphosis from doubt to unshakable conviction. No longer simply an instructor functioning within curriculum boundaries, she was being entrusted to craft an educational legacy that would empower young minds. In the subsequent weeks, Sarah devoted herself to preparing every detail of her proposed curriculum with diligent enthusiasm. She outlined lesson plans, conducted extensive research, and organized workshops for her colleagues to ensure they felt equipped to lead their students through this narrative journey. As the pilot launched, the classroom vibrated with new life, students engaged and immersed in their cultural heritages, connecting ancient wisdom to current realities. The laughter, the spirited debates, and the rekindling of curiosity filled the space as Sarah could see the tangible results of her work taking shape. But more than academic success, something profound happened. The students began to see themselves reflected in the stories they studied. They understood that every fable of resilience tied directly to their own aspirations, fears, and triumphs. As the semester progressed, students flourished, and Sarah found herself feeling more accomplished and recognized than ever. Ultimately, it wasn't just about the stories she had shared, it was about granting her students a voice of their own, a voice she had once feared would never rise above the din of disinterest. She had emerged not just as a teacher, but as an architect of transformation, embodying the strength and persistence she had always revered in the very stories she educated from. In the final faculty meeting of the year, the board acknowledged her with commendations, celebrating the success of her pilot program. Their validation only deepened her resolve and fortified her commitment to continue advocating for narrative integration in education. Reflecting on her journey, Sarah realized that the most significant transformation had occurred of her own volition. She had conquered her self-doubt, cemented her professional identity, and embraced her role in shaping the future of education in her school. The stories that once inspired her became the very fabric of her fulfillment, as she not only taught students but also learned alongside them, cultivating a vibrant exchange of culture and identity. She stood tall that day, her once dimmed voice now resounding with authority, unwavering and certain she had achieved what she once thought impossible, proving that change begins within and radiates outward in ways that inspire others to follow suit. As the meeting concluded, Sarah felt an irrepressible urge to share her journey further. She wanted others to witness the power of personal narrative and the magic of reclaiming one's voice through storytelling. So, she tentatively gathered her materials and began planning her next steps, understanding that this achievement was just the beginning of continual growth. And now, dear audience, this is the moment for you to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now, because only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Don't wait even one more second to share this.